In the deep, silent void of space, a faint signal broke through the usual cosmic noise. It was weak, distant, almost imperceptible, but it carried with it a sense of urgency that could not be ignored. This wasn't just any communication. It was an SOS, a desperate cry for help from a faraway, forgotten world. The message was filled with fear, desperation, and a warning that sent chills through those who received it. No one knew exactly what it meant, but one thing was clear: something terrible was coming, and this plea for help was the last line of defense. The source of the signal came from a planet located in an uncharted part of the galaxy, a world once known for its thriving population and advanced civilization, now on the brink of extinction. The planet's once great cities lay in ruins, its people scattered or lost, fighting a battle they could no longer win. The message, transmitted through the vastness of space, was their final attempt to reach out to anyone who might still be listening. And as it traveled through the galaxy, it reached the ears of a few, those who still had the power to make decisions: leaders, scientists, and military officials. But the message was fragmented, difficult to comprehend. Its meaning was not clear at first. The words spoken were distorted, a mixture of fear and urgency, accompanied by strange sounds and odd phrases that made no sense. But as more and more galactic factions received the signal, they began to piece together a grim reality. The message wasn't just asking for help, it was warning of a threat so dangerous that no one could have ever predicted it. Scientists were the first to study the transmission. They tried to decode the language and understand its contents, but the message was too complex, too alien. Each time they thought they had uncovered a new piece of the puzzle, the next transmission would shatter their progress. Yet, despite the confusion, one thing stood out. The message spoke of an ancient, malevolent force, something far older than any civilization in the galaxy, something that had been awakened, and now it was coming for everyone. Diplomats and political leaders gathered to discuss the situation. Their confusion and fear were evident in every word exchanged. Some believed it was a trick, a hoax designed to manipulate the galaxy into action. Others, more cautious, feared that this was no ordinary plea for help. It was a desperate cry from a world facing an extinction-level event. As the days passed, the initial shock gave way to action. The Council, composed of representatives from various galactic races, convened in an emergency session. The debate was heated. Some suggested that the galaxy should ignore the message. Others argued that the situation was too dangerous to dismiss. Tensions ran high as leaders weighed their options. In the end, they reached a unanimous decision, a decision that would change everything. The message had mentioned the galaxy's most feared warriors, the Deathworlders. These warriors were legendary, known for their survival skills and unmatched combat prowess. They were a rare breed, native to the most dangerous planets in the galaxy, where life was brutal and death came quickly. The Deathworlders had long been out of contact with the galaxy, their world cut off from the rest of civilization. No one knew where they had gone or why they had disappeared. But now, the galaxy's leaders had no choice but to call upon them. The call was made, and the response came swiftly. The Deathworlders, though scattered and long forgotten, were still a force to be reckoned with. Their reputation alone sent waves of fear through those who had dared to oppose them in the past. Yet the galaxy's leaders remained uncertain. Why were the Deathworlders needed now? What made this threat so dire that only they could face it? Meanwhile, as the council debated, the message continued to play, echoing through the communication channels. The signal, faint but persistent, carried on for days. It seemed as though it would never end, its desperate cry reverberating through the galaxy like an endless alarm. But just as hope seemed lost, a new set of coordinates appeared at the end of the message. They were unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, leading to an uncharted region of space, a place where no civilization had ever ventured. The coordinates marked a system that was far from any known galactic routes, a dangerous and unexplored part of space. It was a place that held secrets, mysteries, and dangers unknown. The council stared at the coordinates, their minds racing. What lay in this uncharted system? What could possibly be so important that it would require the galaxy's deadliest warriors to venture into such a place? The galaxy was on edge. Time was running out, and the fear of the unknown was palpable. The Deathworlders were gathering, preparing to answer the call, but even they could not know what awaited them. The galaxy's leaders, meanwhile, were faced with an impossible choice. Would they send the Deathworlders into the unknown, or would they risk ignoring the message and facing an unimaginable threat alone? As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the council room grew unbearable. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. And then, the message cut off, leaving only the coordinates. The decision had to be made. Would the galaxy be ready for what was coming? The countdown had begun, and as the Deathworlders prepared to embark on their journey, a final question lingered in the air. What awaited them in the heart of the unknown? As the message echoed through the galaxy, a silence fell over the council. The weight of what they were about to ask, and what they might be asking the Deathworlders to face, hung heavy in the air. The coordinates to the uncharted system were clear, and with every passing second, the urgency grew. The decision was made. The most feared warriors in the galaxy would be called upon to investigate the coordinates, to discover what lay within this uncharted territory, and confront whatever force was threatening the galaxy. News spread quickly that the Deathworlders had been summoned. Some within the council questioned the decision, unsure of whether this was the right move. After all, these warriors had been isolated for so long. They had disappeared from galactic politics and were now nothing more than legends. No one knew where they were, or if they even existed anymore. The memories of their savagery, their unrivaled strength, their ability to survive and fight against impossible odds had faded over time. Yet, the message made it clear there was no other option. The galaxy's only hope was in the hands of these ancient warriors. In a remote, forgotten corner of space, the Deathworlders stirred. For centuries, they had lived apart from the rest of the galaxy, their home planet an inhospitable wasteland. The very nature of their existence had shaped them into beings of unimaginable resilience, capable of surviving on worlds that would tear apart lesser species. No one, not even the most advanced military minds in the galaxy, truly understood the extent of their power. And now, after years of silence, they were summoned back into action. The leaders of the Deathworlders, the most powerful of their kind, received the signal. The message had been encrypted, but they understood it immediately. Their planet was isolated, its vast deserts and violent storms, keeping it hidden from the rest of the galaxy. Yet the message broke through. They had been called to action, not for some political reason or military conquest, but for something far darker, a threat that none of them could have predicted. The Deathworlders didn't need to discuss it. They had fought countless battles, survived impossible situations, and their survival instincts told them one thing. This was serious. Whatever it was coming, and it had the power to wipe out everything in its path. Their planet had prepared them for moments like this, where survival depended not on numbers or strength, but on instincts, adaptability, and raw power. They would not fail. As they began preparing for their journey, the galaxy held its breath. A small fleet of ships, rough in design but formidable in capability, gathered at the borders of the Deathworlders' home system. Each ship was a symbol of their heritage, a reminder of the warriors who had built them from the ground up. These ships were more than just vessels. They were extensions of the Deathworlders themselves, as brutal and unforgiving as the worlds they came from. But as the ships prepared for takeoff, not everyone in the galaxy shared the same sense of urgency. While the Deathworlders readied themselves for the journey into the unknown, the Galactic Council debated the real threat. Was the message truly a warning? Could it be a trap? Would they be walking into something they couldn't even begin to understand? The galaxy had its doubts. Many species viewed the Deathworlders as little more than mercenaries, brutal, effective, but too dangerous for the galaxy's comfort. It had been centuries since they had played a role in galactic events, and their methods were as archaic as they were effective. Some feared that once the Deathworlders answered the call, it would only be a matter of time before they turned their attention to the galaxy's powers themselves. Meanwhile, in the uncharted system, the countdown was ticking down. The Deathworlders were on their way, but they could not know what awaited them. The coordinates led to a planet in the far reaches of the galaxy, a place where no one had ventured in centuries. Scans had revealed little, and no species had ever made contact with the planet's inhabitants. It was as if the world itself had been hidden away on purpose, and yet something had stirred it from its isolation. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the Deathworlder ships traveled across the stars, each one carrying a team of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors. The fear of the unknown gripped the hearts of even the most seasoned of these fighters. They had faced impossible odds before, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to come. The Deathworlders' leader, a towering figure known as Archon, stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the coordinates on the screen. His eyes, cold and calculating, narrowed as the ship made its final approach to the planet. Archon had led his people through countless battles, but this one felt different. It was as if fate itself had called them to this moment. "Prepare for landing," Archon ordered, his voice deep and steady. "We enter the unknown, but we do so together. Our enemies will learn what it means to face the Deathworlders." The final preparations were made, and the fleet descended into the planet's atmosphere. The surface below was a mystery, a barren world that seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with jagged mountains and swirling clouds. It looked like nothing more than a dead world, yet something deep beneath the surface had awakened. As the Deathworlder ships touched down, their hulls groaning under the pressure of entry, the warriors inside knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever they were about to face, it would be their most dangerous mission yet. But the Deathworlders were ready. They always were. Outside, the winds howled across the planet's surface, but the Deathworlders stood strong, their weapons ready, their instincts sharp. They had come for one reason: to answer the SOS, to confront the threat, and to protect the galaxy from whatever horror had been unleashed. As the ships settled on the barren planet, the final message from the alien world echoed in the minds of the warriors. The galaxy's deadliest must respond. The fate of the galaxy rests in your hands. And so, the Deathworlders stepped onto the alien soil, prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The real battle was about to begin. The Deathworlders stepped onto the alien planet, their boots sinking slightly into the cracked, dusty earth. The air was thin, filled with a strange metallic scent that made their senses flare with alertness. The planet seemed dead, its surface a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and swirling, unpredictable storms. The coordinates had led them here, but no one knew exactly what awaited them. Archon, the leader of the Deathworlders, motioned for his warriors to spread out. His eyes scanned the horizon, his mind already calculating every possible scenario. He was a master tactician, and instinctively, he knew this was no ordinary mission. Something in the air felt different, as though the very planet itself was holding its breath. "Stay sharp," Archon ordered, his voice low but firm. "We don't know what we're dealing with here. Trust your instincts." The warriors nodded, each one moving with precision. Their weapons were drawn, their combat gear reinforced, and their eyes never strayed from their surroundings. The Deathworlders were known for surviving on planets where life was all but impossible, where the very environment sought to kill them. But this world was something else. It was as if it had been waiting for them, its silence deafening. The deeper they ventured, the more unsettling the planet became. The wind howled, carrying strange, distant sounds that sent shivers down their spines. Nothing natural seemed to make these noises. It was as if something, or someone, was watching them. "Keep your eyes peeled," one of the warriors muttered, his voice strained. "I've got a bad feeling about this." Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the ground beneath them. A massive tremor shook the surface, and the Deathworlders braced themselves, weapons raised, as the ground began to crack open. A deep rumble vibrated through the air, followed by a flash of light that illuminated the sky in an eerie glow. Arkin's gaze hardened. This was it. The battle had already begun. A massive ancient structure began to emerge from beneath the surface, as though the planet itself had been hiding it. Towering spires rose from the cracks, their surfaces glowing faintly, their architecture unlike anything the Deathworlders had ever seen. The structure was as alien as the planet itself, and it pulsed with a strange energy, as though it was alive. "It's a temple," one of the warriors whispered, awe and fear mixing in his voice. "No," Arkin replied, his voice sharp. "This is something far worse." The team moved cautiously toward the structure, their weapons ready but their movements calculated. Every instinct told them to be careful. Every part of their training warned them that something was coming. This was no ordinary ancient ruin. The planet was alive with a sense of purpose, and the Deathworlders were not the only ones on it. As they entered the vast open space inside the structure, they found themselves in a cavernous hall, its walls etched with strange symbols and alien runes. The air inside was thick with the same energy that had caused the planet to tremble, a power that was both terrifying and intoxicating. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked open once more, and something stirred deep within the structure. The air turned cold, and an eerie, otherworldly growl reverberated from the depths. "It's coming," Arkin murmured, his eyes narrowing as the sound grew louder. The Deathworlders spread out, their weapons aimed at the source of the noise. But they could see nothing, only shadows shifting in the distance. A pair of glowing eyes suddenly flickered in the dark, and then, in an instant, the creature lunged from the shadows. It was a monstrous being, its form half shadow, half substance, with eyes that glowed with an ancient malevolent energy. Its body was impossibly large, covered in scales that gleamed like polished obsidian. Its claws were like daggers, and its teeth were sharp enough to tear through the thickest metal. It was unlike anything the Deathworlders had ever encountered, a creature born from the darkest depths of the galaxy's forgotten corners. "Take it down," Arkin roared. The Deathworlders sprang into action. Their weapons fired in a flurry of deadly precision, but the creature was fast, darting around the battlefield with terrifying agility. It was clear that it was not just some mindless monster. It was intelligent, a predator with the ability to outmaneuver them at every turn. Arkin moved with lightning speed, drawing his energy sword and charging into the fray. The creature's claws slashed at him, but he parried the blow with his blade, sending a burst of energy across the cavern. The force of the strike sent the creature stumbling back, but it quickly regained its footing, snarling in fury. One of the warriors fired a pulse grenade, but the creature dodged it, sending the explosion careening into the cavern walls, where it left a burning scar across the stone. "This thing is too fast," another warrior yelled. "We need to work together," Arkin ordered. "Trap it." The team coordinated their efforts, using their weapons and their instincts to corner the creature. It wasn't easy, but slowly they began to gain the upper hand. Finally, Arkin delivered the killing blow, his energy blade piercing the creature's chest and sending a shockwave of energy through its body. The creature shrieked in agony before collapsing to the ground. Silence fell once again. The Deathworlders stood panting, their bodies tense, their weapons still raised. "What was that thing?" one of the warriors asked, his voice shaking. Arkin looked at the creature's lifeless body, his expression grim. "Whatever it was, it's just the beginning." The Deathworlders had faced countless threats before, but this was different. This planet held secrets, secrets far darker than they could have ever imagined. And the battle had only just begun. Arkin turned to his team, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the reality before them. "We press forward. There's more to discover, and whatever is hidden here, it's something we can't ignore." The galaxy's deadliest warriors had been summoned to this world for a reason. They had answered the call. But now, They would face something that could very well change the course of their lives, and the fate of the galaxy, forever. The Deathworlders stood in stunned silence, their weapons still drawn as they observed the corpse of the monstrous creature. Its body twitched slightly as if still alive, but Arkan knew better. It was dead. They had seen enough to understand this wasn't just an ordinary battle. It was a sign that something far worse was yet to come. "Stay alert," Arkan commanded, his voice sharp. "This planet is far from empty. Whatever that thing was, it's part of something much larger. We need to find out what we're really dealing with here." The warriors exchanged wary glances, their instincts telling them that they had only scratched the surface. The air was thick with the unspoken realization that the true danger was still hidden deep within this forsaken planet. With the creature defeated, the Deathworlders made their way deeper into the labyrinthine structure, hoping to uncover whatever secret it held. The interior of the building seemed endless. Hallways twisted and turned, leading them deeper underground, toward what seemed like an ancient central chamber. The walls were covered in alien symbols, their meaning still a mystery. Some of the symbols were too familiar, the type seen in ancient records, signs of a long-forgotten race. This was not just any alien world. This was a world that had once held power, a civilization that had vanished without a trace, leaving only ruins behind. Arkan's sharp gaze scanned the symbols carefully. "I've seen these before. In the archives of the old Galactic Council. These are the markings of the Orksor, a race that disappeared thousands of years ago." "Never heard of them," one of the warriors remarked. "They were a brutal race, deadly, and known for wiping out anything they deemed a threat. But they disappeared long before we were born. No one knew why." Arkan's voice darkened with the weight of the knowledge. "And now, it seems, we are about to find out." They continued deeper, the atmosphere growing colder as they descended into the planet's core. There, they found the source of the planet's strange energy, the heart of the structure. A massive chamber, its walls lined with glowing crystals, pulsated with power. At the center of the room stood an enormous stone pedestal, upon which rested a dark, pulsing artifact. Its energy was unmistakable, radiating a sense of ancient malevolence. "This is it," Arkan murmured. "The heart of the Orksor's power. This is what they use to control the galaxy, to dominate all who cross their path. But it's more than that. It's a weapon, one of unimaginable power." The warriors instinctively took a step back, their weapons raised. The artifact seemed to call out to them, its dark energy almost palpable in the air. It was like a living, breathing thing, its energy seeping into the very walls of the chamber. Suddenly, the artifact pulsed violently, sending a shockwave of energy through the room. The Deathworlders staggered back, struggling to maintain their balance. A low, guttural sound filled the air, like a chorus of voices from another time. Voices that carried an ancient warning. "The Orksor didn't disappear," Arkan said, his voice steady but filled with an eerie realization. "They sealed themselves away, and this artifact is the key to their return." As he spoke, the ground beneath them trembled once again. The walls began to crack, and the chamber itself seemed to shake in response to the artifact's power. The Deathworlders could feel the presence of something ancient, something awakening deep within the planet's core. "Prepare yourselves," Arkan commanded. "We don't know what's coming, but we have to stop it before it's too late." The warriors positioned themselves in a defensive formation, their senses heightened as they waited for the inevitable. The planet was no longer just a silent, forgotten world. It was alive with the energy of the Orksor, and something far worse was coming. Suddenly, the artifact flared with blinding light. The ground cracked open, and from the depths of the planet, a monstrous figure emerged, a creature unlike any they had seen before. It was a colossal, shadowy being, its body made of swirling energy and dark matter. Its form was ever-changing, shifting like smoke, but its eyes burned with an ancient rage. "This is their last guardian," Arkan said, his voice grim. "The Orxor are returning, and we're in their way." The creature let out a deafening roar, shaking the chamber to its foundations. The air was thick with dark energy, and the Deathworlders knew they were facing something far beyond their usual enemies. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a battle for the fate of the galaxy. Arkan's eyes narrowed. "This fight is ours. We end this here." The Deathworlders charged into the fray, their weapons clashing against the dark creature's energy-shifting form. It was like fighting against an elemental force, something that could not be reasoned with, only defeated through sheer force of will. Arkan led the charge, his sword cutting through the dark matter. His strikes met with resistance, as if the creature was made of solid shadows. The warriors fired their energy weapons, sending blasts of concentrated fire at the creature. But it was clear that their standard tactics would not work. They would need something far more powerful to destroy this ancient guardian. Suddenly, the artifact pulsed once again, and the ground beneath them shifted. A new surge of energy flooded the chamber, and the creature seemed to grow stronger, feeding off the power of the artifact. "This isn't just a creature," Arkan shouted. "It's a manifestation of the Orxor's will. It's drawing its strength from the artifact." The warriors knew what they had to do. They had to destroy the artifact, the source of the creature's power. With a unified roar, they charged toward the pedestal, determined to stop the artifact before it could unleash the full force of the Orxor's return. But the creature was not about to let them destroy its master. It lunged forward, blocking their path with an almost impenetrable barrier of dark energy. Arkan's mind raced. They couldn't let it stop them. Not now. Not when they were so close. "Keep pushing," he ordered. "We can't let it win." The battle raged on, and the Deathworlders fought with everything they had. The fate of the galaxy depended on them. The Orxor were coming back, and it was up to these warriors to stop them, or to face the consequences of their awakening. The chamber was in chaos. The Deathworlders were locked in a desperate battle with the ancient guardian, a creature of darkness and malice that was seemingly invincible. Every strike, every shot they fired, was met with a wall of energy, as if the very fabric of the planet was defending its master. The air itself seemed alive with dark energy, crackling with the power of the artifact. Arkan's mind raced as he dodged a blast of energy from the creature. It was nearly impossible to find an opening in its shifting form, but he knew that the key to victory lay in destroying the artifact. The Guardian, as powerful as it was, could not exist without its source of power. The artifact was their only hope. "Focus on the artifact," Arkan shouted to his warriors, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We can't win this battle by fighting the creature alone. We need to destroy the source." The Deathworlders regrouped, their movements synchronized as they turned toward the pedestal that held the artifact. But the creature was relentless, and it was not going to let them destroy its master so easily. With a guttural roar, it surged forward, its form becoming a mass of shifting shadows and crackling energy, blocking their path. "Keep pushing," Arkan urged, his voice filled with determination. "We are the Deathworlders. We don't back down." The warriors pushed forward, their weapons firing in perfect harmony. Arkan's sword slashed through the dark energy barrier, sparks flying as the blade made contact. For a moment, it seemed like the creature might finally be weakening. But just as quickly, it unleashed a wave of energy that sent the warriors flying back, their bodies crashing into the walls of the chamber. Arkan gritted his teeth as he rose to his feet, his body battered but his resolve unshaken. The creature had slowed, but it was still far too strong. They needed more than just weapons. They needed a plan, something that would break through the creature's defenses and allow them to reach the artifact. In that moment, Arkan remembered something. In the ancient texts, there was mention of a method to sever the connection between the Guardian and the artifact, a way to weaken the creature by targeting its source. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was the only chance they had. He looked to his second-in-command, a warrior named Kale, and nodded. "We're going to need to sever the connection between the artifact and the creature. If we can destroy the artifact's anchor, the Guardian will lose its power. Cal's eyes narrowed. How do we do that? There's an ancient energy conduit beneath the artifact, Arkan explained, his mind racing. It channels the artifact's power to the Guardian. If we can reach it, we can shut down the flow of energy and weaken the creature. Without hesitation, Cal and the other warriors rushed toward the pedestal, their weapons firing as they fought their way past the Guardian's onslaught. The creature roared in fury, launching another wave of energy, but the Deathworlders were relentless. They had faced worse odds, and they would not be stopped now. Arkan stayed back, watching the battle unfold. He knew this was their only chance. If they failed to destroy the conduit, the creature would grow stronger, and the Orczor would return in full force. The galaxy would be plunged into a war unlike any it had ever known. As the warriors reached the pedestal, Cal leaped toward the energy conduit, his blade glowing with deadly light. With a powerful strike, he shattered the protective barrier surrounding it. The conduit crackled with energy, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The Guardian howled in pain, its form flickering as the connection between it and the artifact began to unravel. Now, Arkan shouted, "Destroy it." Cal drove his sword into the heart of the conduit, and with a final deafening crack, the energy channel collapsed. The artifact's pulsing light flickered and dimmed, and the Guardian let out a scream of rage as it lost its power. For a moment, the entire chamber was silent. But it was only a moment. The Guardian, though weakened, was not yet defeated. With a final, vengeful roar, it charged toward the warriors, its body crackling with the last remnants of its power. Arkan's heart pounded in his chest. "This is it," he shouted, rallying his warriors. "We finish this now." The Deathworlders surged forward, their weapons flashing as they fought with every ounce of strength they had left. The Guardian fought back, but it was clear its power was waning. The artifact's influence was fading, and without it, the Guardian was nothing more than a hollow shell of its former self. Arkan faced the creature head-on, his sword raised. With a single decisive strike, he cleaved through the last of its dark energy, severing its remaining link to the artifact. The creature's form shattered into 1,000 pieces, dissipating into the air like smoke. The chamber fell silent once more. It was over. The Deathworlders stood in the ruins of the ancient structure, their bodies bloodied and bruised, but their spirits unbroken. The artifact lay shattered at their feet, its dark energy finally extinguished. The Orczor were no longer a threat, at least, not in the way they had feared. But as they stood there, victorious, Arkan knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was still a vast, dangerous place, and the forces that sought to destroy it would never stop coming. The Deathworlders had proven their strength, but they would need to stay vigilant, for new threats would rise, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Deathworlders had awakened, and they were ready for whatever came next. The silence that followed the battle was deafening. The once crackling energy that had filled the chamber was now gone, leaving behind only the remnants of the dark creature and the shattered artifact. The Deathworlders stood, their bodies battered, their armor scorched and dented, but their spirits were unbroken. Arkan, his hand gripping the hilt of his blade, surveyed the scene around him. The last echoes of the battle still hung in the air, the fading energy of the destroyed artifact leaving an eerie calm. The creature that had once terrorized the galaxy was no more, and the Orczor threat had been eradicated, at least for now. "Is it over?" Cal asked, his voice hoarse from the battle. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "Have we truly stopped them?" Arkan nodded, though his face was clouded with uncertainty. "For now, yes, but we must remember, the galaxy is never truly at peace. The forces that sought to use this artifact will come again, and they will come harder. This is only the beginning." The warriors stood in silence, the weight of their victory tempered by the looming uncertainty. They had saved the galaxy from an unimaginable fate, but they all knew that the true price of peace was constant vigilance. As Arkan turned to face his warriors, a voice echoed over the comms. It was a faint signal, cutting through the silence like a whisper on the wind. The galaxy had been quiet for so long, but now it seemed that everything was beginning to stir. "Arkan," the voice said, the crackle of static distorting the words. "This is Admiral Kessler. We've received your report. The Council wants to meet." Arkan's gaze hardened. The galaxy's leadership would want answers. They would want to know how the Deathworlders had managed to defeat the Guardian, what had really happened on the planet, and how they could prevent this from happening again. But Arkan knew that their victory wasn't the end. It was just another chapter in an endless war. "We'll be there," Arkan replied, his voice firm. "Prepare for a long journey. There's much we need to discuss." The journey to the Galactic Council was a long one. And as Arkan and his warriors traveled, the weight of their actions began to settle in. They had fought hard, but the galaxy was full of threats that no one could predict. The Council would want answers, but what could they offer? Their mission had been to stop a singular threat, and they had done so. Yet the true enemy was still out there, hidden in the dark corners of the universe, waiting to strike again. The Deathworlders had always been warriors. They had never been diplomats, and now they were being asked to step into the political arena. Arkan's mind raced with thoughts of what the Council would want from them. They had no loyalty to anyone but themselves, and they knew that the galaxy's political factions could never be trusted. Would the Council offer help, or would they try to manipulate the Deathworlders for their own gain? As they arrived at the Council chambers, the tension in the air was palpable. The Council had representatives from every corner of the galaxy, each with their own interests and motivations. Arkan knew that they wouldn't be content with just an explanation of what had happened. They would want to know how the Deathworlders planned to handle any future threats, and whether they could control their power. Inside the chamber, the representatives were already waiting. As Arkan and his warriors entered, the room fell silent. The Council members, who had once dismissed the Deathworlders as nothing more than savage fighters, now watched with a mixture of awe and fear. They had seen the Deathworlders' power firsthand, and they knew that it was something they couldn't easily control. Admiral Kessler stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he regarded Arkan. "You've done something incredible. The galaxy owes you a debt." "But there is always a price," Arkan replied, his voice cold and resolute. "The galaxy is not safe. The forces behind the artifact are just one of many threats. You will need us again, and when you do, we will answer." The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear that they were not ready to make any promises. They had always seen the Deathworlders as a tool to be used, but now it was evident that this tool was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. "We understand," said one of the Council members, a representative from the core worlds. "But you must understand that we cannot simply let you roam unchecked. The Deathworlders are a powerful force, and that power must be governed. We will work with you, but there will be terms. You will not be allowed to act without oversight." Arkan's gaze hardened. "We are not your puppets. We will protect the galaxy, but we will do it on our terms." The Council room buzzed with tension as the representatives realized the Deathworlders would not be easily controlled. Arkan and his warriors had earned their place in the galaxy, but they were not interested in playing by the rules set by others. The meeting continued for hours as the Council attempted to come to an agreement with the Deathworlders. But no matter what they said, Arkan knew that there would always be a line between them. The Deathworlders were not part of the galaxy's politics. They were its protectors, and their loyalty was not to the Council, but to the galaxy itself. As Arkan and his warriors left the Council chambers, they knew that their battle was far from over. They had defeated one threat, but the galaxy was full of dangers that no one could predict. The Deathworlders had proven themselves to be the galaxy's last line of defense, but with that responsibility came an even greater burden. The galaxy had just entered a new era, one where power and politics would collide, and the Deathworlders would have to decide where their allegiance truly lay. The galaxy had been shaken by their actions, but the Deathworlders were unshaken. They had faced darkness, and they had emerged victorious. But as they looked to the future, they knew that the galaxy's greatest challenges were still ahead. The last battle had been fought, but a new war was on the horizon, and the Deathworlders were ready. The news of the Deathworlders' victory spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Across countless worlds, news feeds carried the image of Archon standing at the heart of the Galactic Council chamber, unwavering as the leaders of the galaxy tried to negotiate a new future. For some, it was a moment of pride. The galaxy had survived, and now it would rebuild. For others, it was a harbinger of something much darker. The council members, still reeling from the aftermath of the encounter, began to grasp the full extent of what had happened. The Deathworlders were no longer just a force of nature. They were the galaxy's protectors, a necessary power, and perhaps a necessary evil. The implications were far-reaching. Archon stood on the deck of the ship, staring out into the abyss of space. The stars, so distant and cold, now seemed closer than ever before. The weight of the galaxy pressed down on him and his warriors, but they had survived, just as they had always done. The Deathworlders had faced many battles before this, and they would face many more in the future, but something had changed. As Archon gazed into the vastness of space, he realized that the victory they had won was not just a battle over an artifact or an enemy. It was a victory that gave the galaxy a chance at survival, a chance to come together and rebuild after millennia of conflict. The Deathworlders had always been warriors, but they had just been given a new role in this fractured galaxy. They weren't just protectors anymore. They were the ones who would hold the galaxy's fragile peace together. But peace, as Archon knew, was never guaranteed. Plot progression. The Deathworlders' victory over the Orxor was only the beginning. While the galaxy's leaders debated the future, Archon's warriors began to prepare for what was to come. They knew that the galaxy was filled with countless dangers, hidden factions, ancient threats, and the political struggles of the Council. It was a world that constantly teetered on the edge of collapse, and the Deathworlders knew that they would be called upon again. The Council, eager to keep the Deathworlders under their control, made one thing clear. The warriors would no longer operate on their own terms. New treaties were drawn up, and the Deathworlders were to become part of the galaxy's military apparatus, a force to be wielded by the Council when necessary. But Archon and his warriors could feel the tension. They could feel the ever-present pull of their independence, the realization that they could never truly be controlled. The galaxy's political forces might try to leash them, but the Deathworlders were not meant to be pets. They were meant to be a force that lived by its own code. As Archon returned to his ship, he received a transmission from Admiral Kessler. The message was brief but direct. The galaxy's leaders had decided that the Deathworlders would be granted a place in the Galactic Defense Force, but they would be under constant observation. The warriors would be expected to answer the galaxy's call, but only when authorized. There was no room for renegade actions. Archon's grip tightened around the controls of his ship. His heart beat steadily in his chest, but his mind raced. The path ahead was unclear. The Council had made their decision. The Deathworlders would serve, but they would do so under the shadow of political control. Suspense. Archon knew the galaxy was heading towards a crossroads. The Council's plan was clear: keep the Deathworlders within their grasp, and use them only when the galaxy's best interests demanded it. But what did the galaxy's best interests truly mean? Did it mean saving the galaxy from threats, or controlling those who could save it? As the transmission ended, Archon turned to his warriors, who stood waiting for him in the command room. The weight of their loyalty and duty was heavy in their eyes, but they did not speak. They understood the burden they carried. Archon's mind was already turning. If they were to live under the Council's rule, they would need to be strategic. They would need to keep their independence, their strength, but also navigate the politics of a galaxy that had never truly understood them. A dangerous thought began to form in Arkan's mind. The galaxy's leadership had tried to control the Deathworlders before, attempting to use them as tools for their own political gains. Could they be controlled now? Or would the Deathworlders remain a force beyond the Council's reach, never willing to bow to anyone but their own code? The decision. The next few weeks were filled with tension as the Deathworlders met with various factions of the galaxy's government. Some factions were content to treat the warriors as assets, while others saw them as a necessary evil. But none of them could ignore the raw power that the Deathworlders represented. The galaxy's politicians could debate and negotiate, but in the end, they had seen the true strength of the Deathworlders, and they feared it. Arkan sat in a silent meeting with the Council's most influential leaders. He could see the fear in their eyes as they discussed their terms. Treaties that would give the Deathworlders a place in the galaxy's military, but under the tight leash of the Council. The Council offered control, but they also offered a chance to expand the Deathworlders' influence in the galaxy. For the first time, Arkan understood the true nature of the galaxy's political systems. It wasn't about saving the galaxy. It was about power. It was always about power. As the meeting came to a close, Arkan stood, his warriors following his lead. He could feel the weight of the decision ahead. The galaxy's leaders could offer them power, but the Deathworlders were not about politics. They were about survival, about protecting the galaxy when no one else could. As Arkan stepped out of the meeting room, he knew what had to be done. The Deathworlders would not be controlled. The galaxy's leaders would have to face that reality. A new war begins. The Deathworlders had made their choice. They would not be pawns in a political game. The galaxy was full of darkness, corrupt factions, hidden enemies, ancient threats, and the Deathworlders would be the guardians of that darkness. They had seen the true face of the galaxy, and now they knew that the galaxy needed them more than it could ever know. As Arkan looked to the future, he saw a galaxy on the brink of change. The Deathworlders were no longer just fighters. They were the last line of defense against an uncertain future. And Arkan, as their leader, would ensure that they remained free to protect the galaxy on their own terms. The last battle had been won. But as the Deathworlders prepared for the future, they knew one thing. The true war had only just begun. The stars outside the command room's viewport twinkled coldly in the vastness of space. Arkan stood at the window, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the infinite horizon. The galaxy was changing. It was no longer the fractured, chaotic place it had once been. But it was not a place of peace either. Political games, hidden agendas, and dark secrets still simmered beneath the surface, and Arkan knew that the galaxy was one step away from chaos once more. The Deathworlders had been forced into a new role, one of both power and restraint. No longer could they operate as independent forces, free from the control of the galaxy's political machinery. The Council had made sure of that. But as Arkan thought about the future, he realized that perhaps this was not as dire as it seemed. The Deathworlders had never been a mere tool of war. They were something more, something that couldn't be controlled by any political body, no matter how powerful. Behind him, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, the fleet is ready for the next mission." Arkan turned to face one of his most trusted warriors, Naira, who stood at attention with a faint but steady smile. The warriors had always been more than just soldiers. They were family, bound together by blood, sweat, and shared experience. And now, they would face whatever came next, not as tools, but as the galaxy's true protectors. "What's the word from the Council?" Arkan asked, his voice low but filled with determination. "They've signed the treaties," Naira replied, her expression unreadable. "They granted us official status within the galactic military. But it's clear they're watching us." Arkan nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Deathworlders' power had always frightened the galaxy's leaders, and now that fear was being channeled into control. But Arkan wasn't worried. The galaxy could never truly control the Deathworlders. They could only try, And if the galaxy wanted to survive, it would need the warriors, because without them, the galaxy's future was uncertain. "You know what to do," Arkan said, his voice hardening with purpose. "We don't bow to anyone. We're the last line of defense for the galaxy, and that's how it will remain. We serve when we choose, not when they command us." Naira gave a solemn nod. "Understood." Arkan turned back to the stars, the vastness of space stretching before him like an endless battlefront. The Deathworlders had survived countless conflicts, unimaginable enemies, and centuries of isolation. They were not meant to be controlled or pacified. They were meant to fight, to protect, and to shake the galaxy in ways no one could predict. But Arkan understood something now, something that had become clear after their victory over the Orxor. The Deathworlders were more than warriors. They were the key to the galaxy's future. Whether the galaxy's leaders understood it or not, the Deathworlders held the balance of power in their hands. And as long as the warriors stood together, they could change the course of history. The moment of silence was interrupted by a soft beeping from the console nearby. Arkan approached, his fingers quickly running over the controls. A new message flashed onto the screen, a direct transmission from the council. Arkan's eyes narrowed as he read the message. "They're asking us to prepare for the next mission. It's another galaxy-wide threat." He turned to Naira, a glint of resolve in his eyes. "The galaxy can try to control us, but in the end, we will always be free. And we will fight when the galaxy needs us, and when we decide it's worth fighting for." The warriors in the room stood tall, ready for the challenges ahead. The council may have granted them power, but they would never tame the Deathworlders. Arkan smiled grimly. If the galaxy wanted them, they would have to face the truth. The Deathworlders were no longer simply soldiers. They were the galaxy's reckoning. As the fleet began to prepare, Arkan's thoughts turned to the future. The Deathworlders were now a force of balance, standing between order and chaos, and between freedom and control. They were the wild card in a galaxy teetering on the edge, a force that could tip the scales in favor of life, or destroy everything that threatened it. One thing was certain: the last battle had been won. But a new, even more perilous war had just begun. And this time, the Deathworlders would fight on their terms.